When I was in college, I bought my first car, a 1977 Sunbird. My senior year of college, I played baseball. And so, for some reason, a friend of mine named Troy Boyard, he and I had to take a test, I think, in the morning, but we had a baseball game that afternoon at Bluefield State, which was way far away across the state. And so I took the old Sunbird with Troy, and we were going down an empty interstate, and we saw the policeman turn around. He came back, and he stopped me, and he said, "Sir, do you know how fast you were going?" Now, what was interesting about that story is that I did not know how fast I was going because my odometer had not worked in a year or so. So I could feel Troy starting to giggle over in the driver's seat because me being the spaz, I was all worked up about being stopped by the police, but Troy got a kick out of the idea that I really didn't know when I said, "No, sir, I don't." And there was this pregnant pause in between. Now, you fast forward, I graduated, I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. There's more millionaires per capita in Nashville, Tennessee than anywhere else in the country when I lived there. And everybody drove really nice cars. Well, at some point while I was driving my Sunbird, reverse went out. And so everywhere I went, when I went to the grocery store, I had to strategically drive so that I could get out. There was no parallel parking. There was nothing like that. I had to watch wherever I went. But all the while, looking at all the Mercedes and the BMWs go by. And you know, jealousy kind of takes over. And sometimes my attitude was this: God, you sure do owe me. You know, that's a bad attitude. And that's something that can build in your life, that somehow God owes you. There's a interesting story about the resurrected Jesus who was having breakfast with Peter. And he asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And he says, "Yes, Lord, I love you." And then he says, "Feed the lambs." Then he says to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he says, "Yes, Lord, I love you." He says, "Tend my sheep." Then he says a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter is grieved because he keeps asking me, "Do you love me?" And he says, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And he says, "Feed my sheep." And then we read, "Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you want to go." And this was shown so that it would show him the kind of death that he was to glorify God. And after this, he said, "Follow me." And Peter turned and saw the disciples. And so he's surveying the crowd whom Jesus loved, all those disciples following him, and the one who had been reclining at the table close to him. And he said, "Lord, who is it that's going to betray you?" And when Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about this man?" And Jesus said to him, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." And we find in those few words of Jesus where Peter is trying to explore and find out what's going on and what's going to happen with these people, Jesus gives Peter the witty principle. And it's what I want to give you today, the witty principle. What is that to you, Peter? That's what he says. W-I-T-T-Y. What is that to you? And there's a few things that I want to encourage you with the witty principle, all right? The first is just a reminder, and that is life isn't fair. You can feel Peter getting all worked up when he's been put on the spot, and he's starting to look around and go, "Hey, what about these guys?" And he's like also kind of large and in charge. And you realize in the context of this story that we're not all equal. And life isn't fair. Second thing is this. I have to realize that God's plan is not our plan. And Jesus is trying to even teach this to Peter in that moment. That our plan, our perspective, we think what should be happening and who should be getting what and how it should all be going down. And the truth is, our plans and what we have are not God's plan. And here's the third principle, and that is this. There is a danger in comparing ourselves with other people. In 2 Corinthians 10, Paul writes to the church and he says, not that we dare to classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves, but they measure themselves by one another, and they compare themselves with one another. They are without understanding. But we will not boast beyond limits, but will boast only with regard to the area of influence that God assigned to us to reach, even to you. It's unwise to compare ourselves with other people. It's unwise for me to go, oh, look how much attention that pastor gets, or look how big that church is. It's just so unwise. And in your and our everyday life, it's not wise for us to look around and compare ourselves. And Jesus is reminding him, what is it to you if God blesses that man? What is it to you that God may bless that woman? You don't know exactly what all the plans is. But that last little sentence right after he says the witty principle, what is that to you? He says, you follow me. Here's the fourth thing. I need to focus on following, on what God has for me. God has ordained and measured my days. He knows how he has the whole world in his hands. I need to just focus on following. So I pray today that you'll not be encumbered with all the weight of trying to look around and trying to figure it all out. Why does this guy and what's going on over here? Practice that witty principle. What is that to you? You just focus on following.